Okay.
See, I don't know if you can see my pointer or not.
Yeah.
This area over here, there's like a nodular area near the lining of the lung on this side.
Like right here?
There's one up here. You see the more rounded area where the this is up here.
Yeah.
On the upper
Yeah.
left side of your screen, which is your right side. Oh, see, they measured it here. See that?
Uh-huh.
And another one on the other side that they measured here.
Oh, wow.
Another small area in the middle of the lung here, but on the upper part.
God. And these just grew since
the
last surgery?
Yeah. Since last surgery, we didn't see any evidence of this. I think they were microscopic sized at that point, even since your last scan 3 months ago.
Right, 3 months. They could have
You can
grown
go back
that
and
much?
see, you can't see. Yeah, I mean, they're all small. I mean, they're all like a centimeter or so at most, which is not very big. But unfortunately, I think it has grown to the point where a lot of these are now, there's multiple areas that has come up, as I've shown, at least, I would say a half dozen areas in the lung that look concerning, some of which are, more pinpoint in size, but some of which are about a centimeter. And there's also an area in the liver
Oh, God.
that is not conclusive, but is suspicious. It's right there, I mentioned. It's hard to see because it's not that different in density from the regular liver, but it is a little bit of a shadow that looks like it could be a small tumor deposit there.
And is that a place that it would normally grow?
It can. This one has tumors unfortunately can metastasize almost anywhere in the body, even though lung is the most common.
Okay.
They also mentioned a very small shadow in one of the bones. It's a little bit hard for me to see, one of the spinal bones. Again, it's not conclusive, but it could be an early tumor deposit there as well. And so, again, I think there are multiple areas that are, some of which are fairly conclusive and some of which are suspicious of tumor regrowth. And unfortunately, this is a pattern that is not that uncommon to see with this type of cancer. Once it's already shown the ability to spread to the lung, which yours had already, it's not uncommon for it to have seeded elsewhere, and for those seeds just to take some time before they develop till you can see them. And I think probably this would have happened sooner, but the chemotherapy suppressed it temporarily, but it was only quite temporarily. And only lasted however long it did since you were last on chemotherapy. But chemotherapy was not able to eradicate them, was not able to eliminate them so that they wouldn't grow ever.
Okay.
And unfortunately, none of the treatments we have are likely to be able to eliminate this tumor. It's very unlikely that this is a curable cancer.
Really? Fuck.
I think we said that even in the beginning, but and especially now, I think now that we're seeing this pattern, I think that it's almost certainly one that we don't have a cure for.
Okay.
And the treatments that we do have generally are life prolonging and able to slow it down, but not able to eradicate it. And those types of therapies are like chemotherapies primarily.
Okay. So that's going to be like an ongoing type of thing that I'll have to do.
I think that is generally what we do, is we try chemotherapies to hold it off as long as we can, and to give chemotherapy to try to stabilize the issue and prevent further spread and to prolong people's lives. That is, unfortunately, the best strategy that we have right now, or the best that we have to offer for this right now in this type of cancer.
Okay, and when we're talking life prolonging, how long are we talking?
It's tough to predict even at this stage. You can see it's developing in multiple areas pretty quickly. Over a few months, you can see the change from not being able to see to seeing these multiple areas. And Historically, when a cancer like this has reached this stage and been in multiple areas of the body and recurring like this, I would say without treatment, we tend to quote people a 6 to 12 month life expectancy without any treatment. Although it's kind of, a loose prediction, and certainly, outside of that range is, not impossible at all, even without any treatment.
So I mean, where I
go
get
ahead.
where I don't understand things is so like cancer. I mean, I know people die from cancer all the time, but like, what part of this would kill me? Like, just having it in the body. I mean, like, what
So right
would
now, obviously,
kill
it's
me?
not affecting you right now, but the way cancers kill people, I guess, is when they become big enough that they're starting to interfere with your normal body function,
Right.
and so that can be quite variable from person to person what it could affect first or most critically. So if you have enough tumors in a liver, it can affect the liver's ability to function, and you can die from liver failure. If they
Okay.
become more prominent in the lungs, it can affect somebody's breathing over time, and then eventually, if you can't breathe well enough, that can
Right.
compromise somebody. So there's it really
And that could really happen in like 6 months. I mean,
it's not outside the realm of possibility for a cancer like this, even in 6 months, to get to that point.
and are
Unfortunately,
transplants considered in cancers or not really? Like,
some cancers they are like bone marrow transplant to try to treat the cancer. But you're talking about like a liver transplant, like of the
right, like if my
organ.
liver wasn't functioning and could have a liver transplant or
Usually not, because it's not a curative therapy, because even if you put in a new liver, it starts getting infiltrated by tumors quickly. And so, unfortunately, it's not really a life prolonging strategy. And the medications required to be on a transplant, the immune suppressive ones, if anything, help the tumors grow more quickly elsewhere. And so it doesn't really help people, unfortunately, with advanced cancers for the most part.
wow. So I was planning to take a trip this summer. Just go off in my van and go and see parts of the country because, I didn't really know what my life
Mm.
expectancy would be, and I didn't want to waste time on seeing things and doing things. Is that still
Yeah,
something that I could do
I
with?
think it's I think it's possible, and the question is, how. I guess so. I think unfortunately, when you're faced with something terrible like this, um, I mean, there's some decisions to be made, honestly. I mean, when we don't have a curative therapy to offer, but we have a therapy that is difficult, which is chemotherapy,
Mm-hmm.
and not curative, but possibly life prolonging.
Mm-hmm.
People look at that option very differently. Some people look at that option and say, I want to, get as aggressively to treatment as I can and try to fight this back as much as I can and gain as much ground as I can. And some people, when they're offered something like that, will say, if it's not going to cure me, I don't really want to be on chemotherapy at all and go through these side effects. I'd rather just enjoy the time I have and not be visiting doctors and not be feeling the side effects. And even though I know that, this is eventually going to start affecting me, people, whether or not it's worth being on chemotherapy as a life prolonging but not curative treatment is a real question for many people, and I don't think there's a right answer to that. I think that's a personal choice that's almost philosophical.
So if I did chemo,
Mm.
how would it
If we
look
if we did chemo,
differently from how I did before?
well, I don't think we would go back to the same chemotherapy because I don't think there was enough of a benefit from that one,
Mm-hmm.
given the durability of it and how aggressive that chemotherapy was. I think we would try a different variety of chemotherapy, of which there are several. And any chemotherapy that we would try, we would give like a 2 to 3 month trial period of it, and then check in with a new scan to make sure that it's at least preventing further growth or spread of the tumor to make sure that it's having that desired effect. And what we'd be aiming for is no further growth and no further spread. And if that was the case, we would likely stay with the same chemotherapy as long as it was achieving that desired effect and as long as it was tolerable to do so.
And is that
There
again?
is
Is
even a
that like
pill.
an inpatient like it was before? Or is that like a once a week type thing? Or
Gotcha. So most of the chemotherapies that we use for this are not inpatient, with the exception of the one that you had before. Most of them are outpatient treatments. In other words, coming in periodically for infusions.
mm-hmm.
And there's actually even a pill version of chemotherapy that is a somewhat less intense version that is another alternative as well.
Okay.
That people take at home, although it does require some blood work monitoring periodically to make sure it's not having side effects.
Would I lose my hair again? I'm finally getting hair back.
Some of them, a lot of these chemotherapies, you do lose your hair, but not all of them. The
Okay.
pill version, for example, most people don't lose their hair with.
Mm-hmm.
It's a little bit less intense. And again, it would be hoping for stabilization of the process.
Okay.
I think if you're looking for some initial, let's say, flexibility with your time and what you need to do, I think that I actually would very strongly consider this pill version of chemotherapy as a sort of less intense option to try to provide some stability and breathing room and time for you to do some things like this.
Mm-hmm.
And again, hopefully, provide some degree of stabilization.
Right. And I mean, I didn't feel bad with the last chemo at all. I felt fine, so.
You actually did very well with the last chemo, yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, even though I would consider that to be a pretty intense chemotherapy, many people actually struggle with that one and, give it up earlier than you did, frankly, because it's considered to be a fairly aggressive flavor of chemotherapy,
Right.
or variety or combination, or however you want to state it. So maybe you would do well with other ones too. The other infusional chemotherapies tend to be given more periodically on an outpatient basis. So the other one that I tend to use for this IV version of chemotherapy is a drug called trabectedin. It's given once every 3 weeks by an infusion. But it's an infusion that is a 24-hour infusion. And what we do is we hook somebody up to an IV that they take home with them. It's like a little IV pump. And then they come back the next day and to get detached from it. But then they're, at home. They don't have to stay in the hospital for that. It's still an outpatient one. Now, that's sort of the IV version. That would be sort of my next IV choice. But there's also, again, this pill version that I think has some flexibility to it and doesn't require a new port and doesn't require, as much, let's say, doctor's visits, and is a little bit on the lesser intensity side in terms of generally speaking, although it still has some of the side effects, the IV chemos. I think, that's the types of things we're talking about here, but I think it would be worthwhile to, consider getting on one of these treatments in the near future to try to stop the progress of this, because unfortunately that's what we see over the last few months.
Well, I'm a fighter, so I'm not going to give up.
Yeah.
But I
And,
I do want to take off and enjoy some time and not just, sit around and wait to die either, so.
Well, I think that is very reasonable to do, and I think if you have something in mind for the near-term future, then I would be inclined to start you on this chemotherapy pill, make sure it's going well, from a side effect standpoint, and do some blood work monitoring initially,
Okay.
and then you have a little bit more flexibility to take some, travels, for the first period of time, and just anticipate being back here after you've been on treatment for, 2 or 3 months,
Right.
and be able to check in and see how things are going. And if it's going well, you might stay on that for a while. It's just a, semi-chronic therapy to hold this thing back. And
Right.
if it's not working well, or if the side effects are too intense, then we could readdress things afterwards, and have other IV options. The only other alternatives we consider sometimes in cases like this are experimental therapies. And
I know there's not really a lot for sarcoma, so.
there's not really a ton for sarcomas, more generally speaking. And so generally speaking, when we are looking for experimental therapies, we are often limited to early drug testing, which we call phase 1 trials. Oftentimes early drug testing allows for, like any type of cancer, when companies are looking to test drugs out for their, in their early phases, and seeing if anything is sort of like a hit, and if it's doing okay, and if it's tolerable well. And so sometimes we have trial options that are in the early phases of testing that accept any type of cancer that we don't have a curative therapy for, and including sarcomas. And we do have, and those trials do sometimes, because they're smaller in numbers, they're early testing, they tend to be more, they tend to change more over time. So the options now are different than the options 6 months from now and so forth. They tend to have more rapid turnover, because they're smaller numbers of people that are being tested in. But there are options like that, but they those tend to be a little bit more involved time-wise also. And, because of the early drug testing, they tend to be more involved in terms of the number of visits to Moffitt and how often you would need to be here and so forth. So I don't know if that necessarily synergizes well with your thoughts to be more mobile and to do some things in the near term.
Right.
But I think that could be a consideration later down the line if you were open to that idea. I mean, obviously we're a research center, and that's
Right.
part of what we do is do testing like that.
Right.
But I think this is obviously not the conversation any of us wanted to have, but we need to unfortunately unfortunately, this is what you're dealt with. Unfortunately, you're dealt with a bad hand here, with a bad cancer and a bad result today.
Yeah.
And
to reiterate, because I started recording after we started. So you found places, you found a spot in my back,
mm-hmm.
and you found growth in the lungs, new growth in the lungs.
I would say there's multiple growths in the lungs.
And potentially a spot in the liver.
Yes, and potentially a spot in one of the bones.
One of the bones. What bone was it?
It's one of the lower spine ones, one of your lumbar vertebrae.
Okay. Great. All right. Well.
I think it has to be the same cancer, unfortunately, and it almost certainly is. And obviously, it had seeded, but it was just sort of temporarily stunted by the prior chemotherapy, and is now growing back now. I would be inclined to start on this chemotherapy pill as a disease stabilizing, hopefully, agent, and see how that goes. And
let's do it.
I'll have my team reach out to you and about how we do that. But generally, we prescribe it just like a medication,
mm-hmm.
But it gets sent to your home generally from like a specialty oncology pharmacy.
Right.
And when you're on this pill, the main requirement is that we need to do blood work every couple of weeks at first to make sure that it's not affecting something.
That's fine. Don't mind doing the blood work at all.
And so it doesn't require being in the hospital or getting administered here even. So a lot of it we can do remotely even. And I can help we can arrange sort of like blood work to be done, and then check in like by Zoom with one of the nurse practitioners to review the results and make sure you're doing okay, and help with any side effects by Zoom even. And so we can what
are some of the side effects of the pill versus?
It's usually fatiguing is the main one that we have issues with, and also digestion issues, especially diarrhea and nausea.
Mm.
So it can upset the stomach and cause diarrhea. And,
it is what it is.
Most people don't lose their hair, but it turns the hair white.
Well, my hair's already white, so it's white and black right now. So it's dyed.
It might go white if you're on it.
White would be better than white and black. Actually, I'd take all white versus like this raccoon look that I have.
It's a little bit of a weird side effect, but for some reason this one really tends to turn the hair white.
Okay, that's fine. I don't mind that one bit.
Those are the main things that we see. I mean, other things like we have to look to make sure it doesn't have any liver problems. That's the blood work for that. And so. But the main ones are fatigue and some sort of digestive thing, and we can help manage those ones. But sometimes we have to cut back on the dose if either of those are too prominent, and it's not that big a deal if we need to cut back on the dose. But the starting dose is kind of high, and then we cut back if needed.
Okay.
And that's part of the reason for the initial monitoring closely and the check-ins like that. So I'm gonna, I know I'm kind of hitting you with a lot today already. I'm gonna my nurse reach out to you either later today or early next week to kind of review this a bit more in sort of the practical aspects of it.
Okay.
Taking the pill and how to check in and how to arrange follow-up for that. Now we can prescribe, and then we'll prescribe it and get it, sent over to you relatively soon. The one other side effect that this one does, it actually can raise your blood pressure also. I don't know if you have high blood pressure already, but
no, I'm usually pretty low.
If anything, it can make people's blood pressure be a little higher.
And I was on that metoprolol for probably 6 months after my first lung surgery because they thought I had AFib. But I went to see the cardiologist several times, and
it was okay.
We never thought I did, and I stopped it, and I've been fine.
That's fine, yeah. So again, just some of the more practical aspects of the medication, some information about it, and sort of some paperwork related to needing to submit to your insurance and stuff. I'll have my nurse reach out to you to help with those aspects, and then we'll start this process, and we'll check in a couple of months to see how it's working for you.
Okay.
And take it, 1 month at a time and one scan at a time.
Okay. Well, thank you.
Yeah, I know. What do you say when somebody tells you this?
Well,
Uh,
it is what it
uh,
is, and
I am so sorry that you're dealing with this, and we'll try to get started on this treatment relatively soon, and we'll definitely do our best to help you manage this along the way.
okay. I'm
All
not gonna
right.
give up.
I know you won't. I know you won't. But we're
No.
not going to give up on you either. Okay.
Okay.
So that I just want, I want to be very upfront with everything and very almost brutally honest and
Well, I
blunt with you.
appreciate that. I want to hear that. I want to know
But I also,
the
I
truth.
don't think I do want to help you fight with this, and I know you're a fighter, and so we're not giving up either, and we do have some things, and let's start with this and see if we can just regain some control of the situation with this chemotherapy type of thing, and then we'll explore other things as we move forward. Okay.
Okay. Thank you.
All right. All right.
Okay.
You're welcome. All
All
right.
right. Bye bye.
Bye.